And good evening. Yes, good evening. What in the world is that song doing on a Saturday night? As it's the Northland Sports Page. Newsflash, we're not in our 10 a.m. to noon slot.
Yeah, as an FYI.
I know it's spring forward tonight, late tonight, early tomorrow morning. We sprung way forward to 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock tonight. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, we are back from the X. We are back in the studio. We are back with the show.
We are. What did Aerosmith used to say? Back in the saddle. So
yes.
We're just back.
We are. Guess who's back? Back again.
Mm-hmm.
So Jon Carlson did most of the driving. I'm very happy for myself that I didn't automatically say Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Jon Carlson, but give us a half an hour and we can do that.
Yeah.
Jon Carlson no doubt filled his car with gas when we got home. I'm curious how much gas you and I are going to have left in the proverbial tank to do these next 2 hours, but we're sure going to give it a go.
We are going to give it a go, Brian, and we're gassed. We got to see a couple good days of hockey. We got Hermantown really gutty win yesterday, and lost today. But hey, if you're going to lose in a championship game, right? And so they played very well. They were strong defensively. Today it was like they didn't have any legs left because they had to work like crazy to win yesterday.
Absolutely. I think legs was part of it. And we also talked about how much emotion both teams went through to get to today and how would they do beyond that in terms of, hey, you won an overtime thriller yesterday. What do you have left? And you talked about it actually in the hotel room this morning. You said, what if Cathedral is that team of destiny after what we saw on Friday? Maybe they've got the title.
Yeah, that could, that could be it. I read a story on Gavin Lux today. And he said that every little thing just seemed to go wrong for him for a short period of time, and it really messed with his confidence, and the Dodgers sent him back down, right?
Right.
Well, it may be a little like that one thing went wrong, and then that bounced into another and a third and a fourth, and all of a sudden you're like, what is going on out here? But by then it may have been too late.
Absolutely, and as I called the game today, I made this analogy several times. I said, Hermantown is still a very good hockey team, even though they were outplayed today. But it was ironic to me that St. Cloud Cathedral had Hermantown doing things that Hermantown opponents normally do when your will gets imposed by somebody else.
Yeah, and that's something that neither of us were used to seeing, and I'm pretty sure Pat's not going to want to see it again. And that is that, about the second half of the year, Brian, we've really come to notice that one team will just start to chip the puck. Just chip the puck to get it out of the zone, and they end up spending the whole game in their own zone because there's never an offensive push. And there were periods of time like that with Hermantown that all they wanted to do was move it.
Right, and I think we noticed that when Hermantown got to the state tournament, you think back to that section final against Hibbing. Hibbing was playing well for about a period against Hermantown. And then there was a stretch in the second where Hibbing would eventually possess and just dump it out. And it may have only been 1-0, maybe 2-0, but we all looked at each other and went, this might be done.
Yeah.
And it's just a telltale sign. It's the signature moment that the game turns.
Yeah, and it's you said in the game today, he made a pass to nowhere. And nowhere is always open.
Right.
Right? So if you're just going to pitch it out there and there's nobody there, well, chances are nobody's going to get it.
Absolutely correct. And I'll tell you what, newsflash, a lot of play-by-play guys, certainly myself, have phrases that they lean on. We were actually before the show playing some of the broadcasts back from Friday and Saturday.
Yep.
And there were some moments where I said, pass a little bit too far, or pass got caught up in skates, or pass does not connect. And that felt like it was on loop today, and that's tough to win a game that way.
It was, and it is tough because, I've been watching Hermantown play hockey for 25 years.
Right.
One of the things that they're really good at is tape to tape. They always have been. They take pride in it, and today was not that. Today was in the skates. It was one of those nights. Tip your hat to Cathedral.
Absolutely. I think you have to because the Crusaders have the title. I believe they also won it in 2019. They win today 3-1 over the Hawks of Hermantown. But again, we were down at the state tournament, Jon Carlson and myself, Wednesday. You joined us when we took the trip back down on Friday. And, of course, throughout the day today, we just got back about 90 minutes ago, and we'll be here with you now for the next 2 hours till 9 o'clock. But again, going to the state hockey tournament, I've done it when I was 12. I've done it when I was 15, 16, high school student, and I've done it in my 30s and now 40s. That continues to be, to me, maybe the signature sporting event for this state. And some people will disagree with me, but it's just, you think of how many people just flood the X or flood the building because the Civic Center before that was the same way. It's kind of awe-striking no matter how many times you've been there.
Well, the thing that got me yesterday, and we were talking about it, is that we walked into the AA games, and it's Cathedral, a school of about 17.
The single A games.
Right?
Yeah.
And Warroad from 9 hours away with 1,300 people in town, and the X is full. It wasn't packed to the gills, but it was full. And that's not going to be, that's just, I mean, there were 2,000 people related to the school there, and
Right.
13,000 people were just there to watch tournament.
Well, and it's fun to me to look at the letter jackets, look at the jerseys that are not only on display at the X as part of what they do, but in the crowd. You're going to see stuff for the teams that are playing, but you still see a lot from teams that aren't.
Oh, and shout out to the X. Feel free to get a Northern Storm jersey because
The Northern Stars?
No, the
Or North Shore Storm. Okay.
Because Silver Bay and Two Harbors each have their jerseys up there, but
They do.
they're historical and they look great, but you might want to get the current version.
All right, there you go. And that's just from the single A side. You talked about how full it was yesterday. And then you think about the double A side and what's happening now between Edina and Chanhassen. That'll be packed to the rafters at the X.
Yep, and it should be. But there's a case where you've got the school Chanhassen is bigger than the school body of Warroad and Cathedral together with then about half of the rest of the town. And they still filled it. I mean, with Edina and Chanhassen, you expect the whole thing to be full. But it's surprising when you go there. It shouldn't be because it's the hockey tournament, right?
Right.
But it's surprising when you go there to realize that in a regular season game, they might put 2,000 people in the barn. But here at the X, it's 13.
Absolutely. So you mentioned shout out to the X, and you talked about the jersey that they should acquire. One thing I don't think they can acquire that's any better is the way that the staff treats us there.
Oh my
because
gosh.
From Tim Layton, who helps run the whole show for the State High School League, to Julie up in the press box, to Mark Parrish helping me with some pronunciations. That was kind of fun. We were treated about as well as you can be treated throughout the tournament itself.
Don't forget Johansson was
That's
there.
right. Well, Joe Hansen, what did we say yesterday? Just good for the soul.
Yep, he is 100% that. He is one of the nicest guys I know. Let's
100%.
be honest.
I agree with you 100%.
But you get treated so well by everybody there. Is from the elevator people all the way up to, like you said, the people in the press box where we were at, to random people you don't know once you're up there. Because
Right.
it's kind of like you're up here, so you must belong. How you doing? Those sort of conversations. So yeah, that was fun.
It's kind of a confidence boost because you're right. It's, well, you're here, you must be somebody. And we're like, well, not really, but if you want to treat us that way, you go ahead.
We got there on Thursday, and
Or you got there on Friday.
And we go up and get ready to go, and there's Tim, like, no, you can't go anywhere. Somebody screwed up, and somebody put somebody in the wrong booth. You have no place to go. We're like, wait a minute now. What? He goes, well, we'll find something for you. Take a breath. We're like, we're good. I know who needs to take a breath.
He looked
It's
at
not
us as though we were stressed. There was no stress here whatsoever.
at all.
But again, the X puts on a world-class event. The Civic Center before that did too. Again, when I think of memories of the state tournament, I'll be 45 in just over a couple of weeks here. I would say 35 of my 45 have state tournament memories somewhere.
Does it surprise you at all that that the X hasn't tried to go out and grab a set of clear boards?
Just to be Civic Center-esque?
Just to do, because Minnesota likes that stuff. They like the historic stuff.
That's true, but I mean, if you look at venues in Minnesota, the X might be the best, and I'm saying that as a guy who absolutely worships Target Field.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. The entire facilities of the state of Minnesota, it's got to be the X, right?
You would think.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Twitter poll we could put out eventually.
Yeah, I would think that's true. I know it's not Target Center.
Not yet. Although, that's been a busy place too. With the Women's Big Ten tournament, I mean, the Caitlin Clark following, as Chelsea Brown put it, basically the Beatles is the Iowa women's basketball team.
Clarkapalooza.
They are plenty of crowd-producing folks as well.
Oh, 100%, but that's not because of the building.
Right.
People go to the X to see it.
The building is there too.
All right, so it's at Target Center. How do we get there again? How do we get out? With the X, it's like, let's go to a hockey game.
Right. But it's interesting because as we are wanting to do, we were talking hockey and we slipped in a little basketball coverage because we're not the folks that are absolutely staunch on we love this sport and we don't like this one. We are just not like that. We love kind of all four of the majors and sprinkle in some others that aren't part of the four majors as well. But we were talking on the way down on Friday. We said, is this the signature event, like I said earlier, that the state has to offer? And we weren't really sure how to answer that. And I rephrased the question. I channeled my Topher Davis as an attorney. And I said, well, let me rephrase. If somebody was moving to Minnesota, how would you explain to them, here's why or here's how you become a fan of this sport when you live here? And we're going to do it for each of the four majors tonight. But we said with hockey, I think you've got to start the conversation with the state high school hockey tournament because the state stops. If you have a dog in the fight, it's one thing. If you're a big hockey fan, it's another thing. But there are people that are neither of those, that are, I'm watching the tournament because that's what you do.
I think you're right in a snapshot way. I think what they need to understand is the reason it works is because we watch closely our high school kids turn into college kids,
right,
turn into NHL guys, and we can recite verse of when we've seen them, right? Just something as simple as Austin Pagansky, who played for Cathedral a decade ago.
Right.
Like, he gets a cup of coffee, right? And I'm like, I remember that guy. We did da-da-da-da, and I can talk to 9-10 different people about how it's exciting to see him get in there, and that's that sort of thing. And it doesn't have to be the NHL. We know, like Jack Conley's playing in Germany. Robbie Bortson played in Germany. We've got all these players that we have.
Suddenly this is turning into Duluth Marshall Hockey Hour, but continue.
I don't know where your guys all go.
Further than yours. Go ahead.
Well, ow. but those sort of things, the player becomes like family. Right. It's because we knew that guy when. I think Minnesota's good at I knew that guy when.
Well, and I agree with you there because it's one of those things where in this state, when you hear state of hockey referenced a lot, I understand it, I agree with it, but as someone who loves a lot of the other sports, I cringe because I often take it as, well, you're just dismissing all the other sports. But then if you really sit and think about it, you look at how high school hockey draws in this state. We've talked about there's an East-West divide in Duluth. Mm-hmm. There's a Hermantown-Proctor divide. There's rivalries galore. College hockey, UMD and St. Scholastica can be the almighty unifier, so college hockey matters. And then what did we just say? The best venue in Minnesota is the Pro Hockey Home Arena. So you can love the other sports, but you can still acknowledge, it's probably the state of hockey.
Yeah, and you know what? I think most people do. I think even if you're a basketball lover, you might say, well, the cities is basketball first, hockey second, and I think that's correct.
It might be, yes.
But
absolutely, Minneapolis and St. Paul, yes. The surrounding, I don't know.
But see, this is where you get into the political argument, because if it's density of people, then it's a state of basketball. If it's square footage, it's a state of hockey, right?
Right. That's the whole people vote, areas don't.
Yes, that's exactly what that is.
That is how that goes. That's a signature moment for us to talk politics. We promise we won't do it again. But again, the opening topic tonight is about signature moments, signature events, signature players. And if you were to explain to someone coming to Minnesota how to understand the fandom and the fan bases for each of the four major sports, and even more, the four major men's pro franchises, how would you explain it? So let's continue to go on hockey, because we said, well, hockey, you don't necessarily have to do it professionally, and you don't. And truthfully, you probably don't have to do it with any of them if you really think about it. But how do you explain it with pro hockey? Because I think if I'm an outsider coming to Minnesota, you might love the building, because we just said people do, but you might sit there and say, well, why is Minnesota so passionate about this consistently mediocre professional hockey team? And part of me thought, well, they went without one for X number of years.
They had it stolen from them.
Right.
It's a bigger deal than it just didn't have one.
Right. It was Norm Green still sucks is what you need to understand. That can be your signature catchphrase, if you will. But then you said, well, wait a minute. We go all the way back to 1980s Olympic team, because Minnesota basically built that. Apologies to Massachusetts.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's so many reasons why it's that way. And it goes back further. Like the stories of Henry Boucher, right?
Right.
And we can I don't know that much about Henry Boucher, but I can tell you exactly how he got hurt in the state tournament.
Right.
Right. We go to George Puava, who many people know when I say that name, and many people don't. But he was Paul Bunyan coming in from Bemidji, and they had a grade 8 series way back in the day when the kids from Minnesota would play. They'd pull all-star teams from different states, and Puava threw a guy through hockey glass at Detroit's Joe
Louis Arena. Now it's Little Caesars or whatever. It's been renamed 52 times.
On the request of Herb Brooks.
Nice.
Herb Brooks said, Georgie, take care of this. I mean, those legends are what push hockey, regardless of all the levels.
I agree. I even go a different direction. I tell people, I went to Duluth East. I know a thing or two about hockey. And people give me Dave Spiar and Chris Locker, and I enjoy that because I'm a year younger than they are, and we know each other. Mm-hmm. But for East hockey, I start with Phil Verkota. Why? Because he was on that team.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. It is Minnesotans' ability to look at hockey and say, these are our guys.
Well, and it's interesting to me because I don't picture Minnesotans as arrogant people, because there's Minnesota nice.
When it comes to hockey,
you can insert passive-aggressive if you'd like, and you'd be somewhat accurate. But yes, especially when it comes to hockey, nobody loves their own brand more than Minnesotans do.
I tell you this, if Ben Johnson, the basketball coach at the U, was able to corral the talent in Minneapolis for a couple years, men's basketball would be that too.
Well, and the few cups of coffees that they had, it being a good basketball team, albeit the Clem scandal, what have you, men's basketball for the Gophers, when it was good, was super fun.
Because that's part of this, right?
Yeah.
The Gophers hockey team used to only be Minnesota kids. That was a rule, right? And so when they would play, they were our kids. I mean, the joke and now granted, I wasn't a Duluth kid, so I'm going to go ahead and offend some Duluth kids.
It was UMD had all Canadians.
It was the University of Saskatchewan South is what they called it.
Yeah.
So the thing is that when that Gopher team was all Minnesotans, you could like other teams, but that was always a team, right? That was always the Minnesota team. Well, if Ben Johnson could figure out how to do that down at Williams Arena and have it be basically the all-Metro team plus, a few or 4 or 5 guys from around the state, and that became us rather than just the universities, it would change the dynamic.
Right. I would appreciate that about 4,000% because I do love basketball. And as much as I like broadcasting at the X and how, sexy it looks as a sports venue, one of my favorite places to be at a game has been Williams Arena, and renovations be damned for a long time.
Yeah, no, and it's sad because, Brian, we've seen what Williams does full.
When it rocks.
Right? But these kids who are 10, 11, 12 years old, the ones that really are starting to get interested in sports, right? They've never seen that. It's just a weird old building with a floor that's not on the ground.
Absolutely. So once again, we found a way from hockey to basketball. So let's just go there. What's the signature moment or event that would help people moving to Minnesota understand where their basketball fandom lies? I think we know professionally where it is because without this guy, I don't think there is a franchise literally still in this state because they were threatened to be gone a while ago. It's the drafting of Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, easy.
Because it was new. It was a high school kid going straight to the NBA.
It was a risk.
There was Kobe. There was Jonathan Bender. After that, high school kids became a thing.
Yep.
But it was a big risk. And just even all these years later, anybody who's halfway decent that puts on a Timberwolves jersey is the next Kevin Garnett. Not necessarily in their style of play, not necessarily in their build.
Their intensity, none of that.
But they're the next leader, so they're the next Kevin Garnett.
And the closest one we've ever had, we have right now.
Right.
But you can't explain the difference in There's no explanation of the Timberwolves at all without a whole chapter, a whole half of the book donated to or dedicated to Kevin Garnett, which is still the idiocracy that he's not involved yet is not unfound on people. And then, but if you go further and you think about Mussey's Gophers, who were the traveling all-stars there for a while, where they were fantastic, they were fun, people came to watch them play because of the way they played. And so I think that basketball history in Minnesota professionally is a little narrow because the Lakers, my dad sort of remembers.
I was going to say,
Lakers,
are we choosing to make it narrow because you don't have enough people around anymore to say, well, we had a team stolen from us too?
Yes, I think that's true, and I think that's happening with the Wild because more and more people are forgetting the first.
I was going to say, there's a large chunk of a fan base that has no idea what Norm Green still sucks even means.
Yeah,
which for a lot of people our age and even a little bit younger and certainly older, that's a T-shirt.
And I've told you that is a reason that I'm not a huge NHL fan. Because
you disconnected. When they were taken away from you, you said, fine, I'm leaving.
And I lost 20 years of fandom, which I never got back.
Right.
So I think that you can't understand Minnesota sports fandom, but specifically basketball fandom if you don't know Kevin Garnett, the story.
100%.
We adopted him. It wasn't just another basketball player.
You forget that he didn't grow up here because we sure treat him like he did. Because I'll tell you what, when you get here and you're just out of high school, you still kind of did a lot of growing up here.
State of Minnesota adopted Kevin Garnett
in a heartbeat,
and so he is our guy. No matter what he's doing, if he's on TV, it's like Randy Moss, right?
Yep.
Randy Moss is our guy.
No doubt about that. I agree with you 100%. Now, baseball's right around the corner.
Yeah.
In fact, I was getting updates at a spring training contest, Twins over the Yankees today, as we were broadcasting the Hawks championship tilt, because I know during one of the breaks I said to you, hey, Buxton hit a home run. You looked at me like, what in God's name are you talking about? But that's what came across my phone, and it did happen.
Was that batting practice? Was he still hurt, or is he in center field?
We'll talk about that during buy or sell. Spoiler alert. But for the Twins, what do you need to understand in terms of fandom for this team? Because I went a little bit outside the box, or maybe a little bit too cute. But I said, you need to understand what the Homer Hanky means. Mm-hmm. Because the Homer Hanky was a big part of the 87 series, a big part of the 91 series. And now every time they make the playoffs, no matter what color it is, it comes back.
It's hard for me to nail this down because I see what you're saying. and that was such a big deal because they were so bad.
Right.
And then
they weren't. Then they had 2 in 5 years.
But we saw these kids, right? It wasn't a
the 82
free agent.
grew up together.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. So that one is difficult for me.
Is it as simple as the Wolves when you say Kevin Garnett? Do you just say Kirby for the Twins? I think you're dismissing Oliva, Carew, and Killebrew. But again, you're dealing with age brackets.
But you're doing what I was about to do. I think there's a thread of superstar through this Twins organization that any generation can follow and hand off to the next.
Because you could bring it to Mauer now, too.
You can bring it to Mauer. Now you can bring it to Buxton, or you could say Correa, or however you want to do that. But you'd start with Killebrew, and you'd go through Oliva, and then it's Carew, right? And then it's Puckett, and then it's Torrey.
And then it's Mauer.
Yeah, and so I think there's this thread of, and they almost all connect. They almost all have played with each other, or right close to each other. Like Puckett and Carew weren't on the same team, but Carew was still in the league when Puckett started, I believe. And I bet it's close.
He may have been on the Angels still, yeah.
Oh, he would have. Yeah, he wasn't back here. But
all right. But I mean, we're talking 1984. He may have been swan song-ish with the Angels.
Right. He would have.
I think he was a coach by 86, but I'm not sure.
So what I'm saying is as a baseball fan in Minnesota, there's always been a guy that you could always follow and you could compare to. Puckett's great, but man, imagine if Oliva hadn't hurt his knee.
Right.
Or is Buxton? Man, Buxton had so much potential, but so did.
How many what ifs can you throw? Because Joe Mauer, if he doesn't get concussed in a somewhat meaningless game in 2013, yes, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. The story ends nicely, but if he stays the best catcher in the game for a longer period of time, what does his team do? If Kirby, yes, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer too, doesn't get drilled by Denny Martinez and goes on to get 3,000 hits and becomes one of the best hitters ever, the what if game is really Twins-esque.
Well, and Tony O. Just start
you
there.
just said, if his knees survive, he's got one of the storybook careers.
Can we never have sprinkler heads in outfields again? Here was a question.
Does he go to the Hall of Fame 30 years earlier?
Oh, yeah. Look at his numbers to the point he got hurt. I had a great question, just a sidebar for a second. Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle, which one's better?
Mays.
But you know how close it is?
Yeah, if the career stayed intact, is it Mickey?
When pre-Mickey's knee injury, right, it was deadlock. Because Mantle could run. That's what nobody remembers, is Mantle was a stolen base guy too. So anyways, that's beyond the scope of our conversation.
Right. The other thing specific to the Twins is, do you modernize it hard enough where if somebody's moving to Minnesota now and you have to explain Twins fandom and Twins fan behavior, I know there's a faction of our listeners out there going, guys, you didn't bring up how cheap the poll ads are. You got to explain that to everyone. I'm not going to go there yet.
Our ownership has been questionable forever.
But do you have to explain the breaking of the streak last year? To be like, you have to understand the collective sigh of relief that this fan base got, albeit in kind of a made-up playoff series that has just come around in recent years. But they hadn't won a playoff game since I was going to Grandma's Sports Garden in my 20s on the regular. They won it last year when I was age 44, which I still am again for 2.5 more weeks.
Under the Vikings, I have people need to understand that the Vikings are always good.
Well, and I'll tell you this. I was
safe.
Trying to use this for you as a segue because there has to be a tinge of negativity that I think you have to treat anybody with kid gloves that's coming to Minnesota and say, now, you're going to have fun being a fan of these Minnesota teams to a point. By the way, here's the point. The Vikings, we can go on this train for a while,
we could.
But I was using the Twins to get you there. Do you talk about the streak?
I just don't. Because it's become ingrained. So maybe you do, but maybe it's not breaking of the streak. It's the streak itself.
If I'm explaining it, here's what you do. I go, yeah, I know all about the streak. But on the men's side, this is the only team with a title. I let them off the hook.
I think you could say, all right, so the Twins in a nutshell. Let's go back. We talked about Joe Mauer before he got hurt, right? We're going to turn on this game that the Yankees played at the Twins. And this is the Twins
We're going to show Phil Cuzzy.
This is the Twins year. And that happens, Phil Cuzzy. Thank you very much. And the Yankees go on to beat us for the rest of our lives. That's Twins baseball.
Well, as much as Target Field is beloved, certainly by me, do you have to explain kind of the quirky joys of the Metrodome? Because all the championships took place there.
Yeah, but I think
lots
that's
of meaningful games took place there. Sure, but how do you explain that we played in this absolute dump? Not a place where you can get a headboard, but a dump of a stadium. You're welcome. I hope your wife is listening tonight.
She's listening.
Yes. But I mean, it was a crappy stadium, but it was our crappy stadium. And the home team has the advantage of knowing the quirks of it. and they took every advantage they could.
So the only time I really refer to the Metrodome is when people say, why did Mauer never reach those numbers again that he got as when he won the MVP?
Because his wall scrapers didn't clear any walls at Target Field.
And his singles didn't go to the wall for doubles. I mean, that's honestly the reason, is that the turf was so fast at the Metrodome that when he hit the ball, it went.
All right, so since we're taking the turn to negative
Yes.
town, what better segue than how do you teach somebody about, hey, you're moving to Minnesota, you want to adopt the local team. What's it going to be like to be a fan of the Vikings? You started off right. They're
Yes.
always good.
The Vikings are always good because they're good for us with the Vikings is safe. Because when they're awful, we're mad. And when they're good, we're like, oh my God, when's the shoe going to drop?
Well,
Right?
when they're bad, I feel like there's apathy or genuine disinterest. We want to think football's king, but we have no shot. Why do I care?
Yeah, football's king. We tear people apart then. We want Zimmer out of here, this guy out of here, that guy. I mean, one failed draft, and where's Kwesi?
Yeah, Kwesi's done. Yeah, Kwesi's got till next year.
But if they're good, they're safe. There's just a little bit more that we could do, or, yeah, that didn't go well for us. If they're really bad, we go nuts. If they're good, if they're really good, we go, oh boy, how's this going to end?
So what style of negativity do you see?
And you know what, guys? 10-8. Because you're just saying, you know what, guys? 10-8. Because you're just saying, you know what, guys? 10-8. Just 10-8. And if you get,
Which is hard in a 17-game season,
if
but
you
go
get
ahead.
10 wins early, if you're like 10-3, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be awful. If you're 6-5, you're like, hey, the rest of this season could be pretty good, because for our entire lives, they've been 10-6. Right?
Here's what I would
Our
tell
entire
somebody.
lives.
Right, but here's what I would tell somebody moving to Minnesota. Okay, here's a challenge for you. Here's a homework assignment. I'm going to give you a football game scenario. You tell me the most inventive way a team could lose this game, and I'll tell you if the Vikings have already done it.
Actually, that's probably the answer in a spot. So what's it like how do you know if you're a Vikings fan? The phrase wide left isn't just a random thing you talk about that's actually a turning point in Vikings fans' lives.
Or do you simply do this? Charles Schultz is Minnesotan, correct?
Yeah.
Do you just send them the comic strip where Lucy pulls the football away from Charlie Brown every time and go, this is Vikings
Minnesota
fandom.
football.
This is what you do.
Up or down by 1-0, time left on the clock.
What do you explain to people about the Lynx? Because we don't talk about them enough. We don't do the women's sports franchises enough. I know they got a PWHL team now that we're all learning to love as well. With the Lynx, I go, cling to them because they might actually win and the coach is awesome.
So I think it might be time to look at the New England Patriots and the Lynx in the same frame. Our head coach is the best head coach in WNBA history, right? She's known nothing with Maya Moore. She's won nothing without Maya Moore. And so I think what you need to look at is our college basketball team has Lindsay Whalen, our professional has Maya Moore, and they've won a whole lot of games.
And since they've been gone, to quote Kelly Clarkson, it's been not a lot.
Yeah.
They are the best team we have, and they're in danger of sliding into territory that the other ones have lived in for a while.
But the good news is that Cheryl Reeve is that good. Like they're never bad because she's good at putting a team together.
So those are signature moments from Minnesota teams. Of course, the all-tournament team of the state tournament was talked about earlier today on the Class A side. We're going to try it first.
Let's try it.
The Northland fan team or teams for the schools we covered this year. Selections are next. Jon Carlson, who else is going to help us?
Why
We'll
not?
be right back. We did a lot of good old hockey games, especially in the past few days, taking Hermantown through their state title quest. Came out a little bit short. 3-1 St. Cloud Cathedral beats them today in the state title game. Of course, we had it for you. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Jon Carlson. We were all there. Newsflash, we're all here again. I'm going to pass it to Dave Cook. Dave, something that John did beautifully all tournament long was list our sponsors, but here on the show, that falls to you.
Yeah, I got a little something to live up to here, John. Let's start with Arola Architecture Studio, the original of our sponsors. Ryan Arola, thank you very much for all the time and effort you've put into this show. Hoops Brewing, OAR Holdings, Kraus Heating and Cooling, your carrier HVAC authorized dealer here in the Northeast. Advantage Implement Screen Printing, the Blackwoods Group, including locations on London Road, in Proctor, in Two Harbors, at Blackwater downtown, just down the street from us here, Brian, and Tavern on the Hill, Mount Royal Bottle Shop, Stewart's Bike Sports and Trophies, Kohler Toyota and Kohler Hyundai, and Comfort Systems of Duluth.
Absolutely. So we go to Jon Carlson right away. First of all, we've missed you. It's been about 2 hours since we've seen or talked to you. But how do you do? Dave Cook just gave the sponsor rundown. You're the guru at that. How did Dave do? We got to grade him out.
He's got a lot more experience than I do at doing that, so I think he did a wonderful, fantastic job.
He's lying to you. I could tell. His voice changes.
I was going to say, don't they say if you're lying, there's a tell in your tone? I don't know. I trust John, but I don't know about that one.
Right. I don't know about that one either.
Well, I love the way Dave does it, so I give him an A+.
All right, perfect. Well, you did an A+ job with us all season long on the high school hockey coverage. So what we're going to do, we talked about this most of the trek back from the cities, is we know that the DNT soon enough will do their all-area team for boys high school hockey, and they have a much larger area than we do.
Yes, they do. They can cover, frankly, they cover whomever they'd like to cover. And the Duluth News-Tribune is the biggest newspaper in this corner of the state, so yeah, they can probably pick anybody they want.
Right, so they will have folks from Grand Rapids, they will have folks from Rock Ridge, they may have folks from War Road, the Falls,
Ashland,
North Shore, Superior, what have you. We are going to do Northland fan teams, emphasis on plural.
Yes, we're gonna try to put together a 3-team, first team, second team, third team, hockey teams.
Basically coverage teams for us, and it comes to the teams that we cover. So we covered this season Hermantown, Duluth East, Duluth Denfeld, Duluth Marshall, and Proctor. Yep. We sprinkled in a little bit of Cloquet. We thought about having them as part of this. We decided not to. We could have, because there was a lot of talent up here this year.
Yeah, there was. There was talent there. There was talent Superior. We really didn't see Superior at all. We talked about North Shore on the way in. I think that we could have talked, a little bit about them, but we wanted to stay focused on the ones we cover the most.
So, Jon Carlson, I want to see if the debate stirs here live on the air as well as it did in the car, because we came up with 3 teams, but it wasn't all, yes, sir, absolutely, I agree with you 100%. There was some spirited debate coming up by 35.
Well, I agree 100% because, I'll take a look at the goaltender type situation.
Whoa,
you had so many great...
Before you do that, yep. Are we going 3-1 or are we going 1-3?
I think we should start with our first team.
Okay. All right, now you go.
I'm just making a comment that there were so many great goaltenders this year.
I would agree with that, but we think that above and beyond, the first one was easy.
The first one was easy. Our first player in the 2023-24
Northland fan team, all coverage team.
First team goaltender from Proctor is A.J. Riles.
A.J. Riles was a level above. Now we can talk about Dane Calloway may have had a stronger strength of schedule, but the decor in front of Dane Calloway was second to none. We're going to talk about them here soon, too.
Yep.
A.J. got hung out to dry several times. I guess the comeback to that would be he never dried.
Yeah, and again, we're going to talk, at some point we'll talk about the kid from Marshall, but where's Proctor without A.J. Riles? Like, honestly, if you look in the mirror, Proctor fans, where's Proctor this year without A.J. Riles? Oh, better, but they're not where they were. That kid can play, and he's the number 1 goalie in northeastern Minnesota.
I would agree with that. And, John, you are the king of goaltender statistics. I know that A.J.'s just popped out at you every time.
Well, I think even though their season ended a little early as far as they were concerned, I think he was like number 3 or 4 in the state as far as a leading goaltender. So, I'm glad for him that I think right now he's playing in Alaska, and then he's going to go to Lindenwood College in Missouri to further his education and further his hockey career.
Who would thought you'd go to play hockey in Missouri, by the way? I thought, but the thing that got me about AJ above all was that dirty old scoreboard at the X. His name was always on there when the Brimsick Award came out.
Right.
He was one of the finalists.
You get into that, and it shows how good you are.
Right. All right, so first team defenseman.
I was going to say, Dane Calloway didn't get the first team goalie because the decor in front of him was so talented, led by our decor on this first team.
Our decor, yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Pat Andrews loves his defensemen, so did we on the first team.
Yeah, so the first one we'll go is Esther Brooks.
Yeah, Will Esterbrooks was quite a story in basically the last 24 hours because he sat out the majority of the semifinal win over Matamidi. When he sat out, it looked like a different team. Would he or won't he go today, or would he or wouldn't he, I guess I should say, to use proper English.
Right.
But he did go today, and just yeoman's work to be out there.
Well, here's the thing. If we made a captain for this first time, he's probably the captain of the first team as well. And of
because
course,
Pat would tell you, if you want to win a state title with our team, you need a defensive captain.
And Nelson will be his sidekick.
Right.
I know that this is probably the one that we had. It's this one or a later one that we had the most spirited debate about.
Absolutely, because, John, I know that we like the way Hermantown played defensively, but it certainly helped overcome, the exception maybe being today, a Hermantown team that didn't score like years past.
Well, absolutely. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to St. Cloud Cathedral. They pretty much muddied up everything And when you talk about Will Estabrooks, I want to liken him to a quarterback. He was the guy that kind of made things run in their offensive zone.
Well, and I like the versatility that they used with him because you have to trust a defenseman to be able to put him down in the play deep offensively. And then we saw on the power play how many times today and throughout the season, Will Estabrooks may be a defenseman on the roster. He's a wing on the special team.
Well, the Wild, five forwards on their power play. The Hermantown Hawks won.
Yeah.
So the thing about Estabrooks is it's one thing to see a kid play at that level, right? It's another thing to see that entire team play without him, and what does it look like? And we got a chance to see that yesterday, and they were scrambling without Estabrooks. And, I mean, he's that guy, right? But his defensive partner...
I was going to say, one person had to really scramble to make things right in the absence of Will Estabrooks, and he did it. And I would argue that he gets overshadowed too often because of how good Estabrooks is. He didn't get overshadowed for our selections. And that would be Drew Nelson of the Hermantown Hawks as well.
Because Drew Nelson yesterday, for instance, when Estabrooks was gone, they were running three defensemen out there most of the time, and he was the guy that was out there. Like, they've got plenty of other good defensemen. We're going to talk about another one here in just a little bit. But Nelson's the guy we've been talking about for 3 years. Like you said, easily overlooked. But the last 3 or 4 times I've seen him, he's just been quietly the guy.
All right, so we've got A.J. Rylitz, we've got Will Estabrooks, we've got Drew Nelson. We need some forwards, and the caveat is this. They are simply forwards. So if we have 3 centers, nobody could say, hey, you have 3 centers, good luck making a line out of that. This is our team. We can do what we want.
It's our team. We'll cry if we'd like to.
Absolutely. So I want to start with Proctor again.
Yes, let's do that.
Because A.J. Rylitz was phenomenal. The defenseman in front of him played well, not as well as Hermantown's defenseman did. But you got to score to win games. AJ's going to keep you in it, but somebody's got to score a little bit. There's some electricity in the Proctor forward group as well, led by this guy.
At the beginning of the year, if you'd have laid all these players out, the one kid I would say I wouldn't have even thought about putting him in here, but he absolutely belongs is one Tanner Ross. Forward from Proctor, the guy who makes them go. We would see it shift to shift. There was a game we did earlier this season, and he took a penalty in a game that was close. And all of a sudden, it was like, how come Proctor quit playing? They're in their own zone the whole time. Then Ross hits the ice. Now it's going this way the whole time. He was the fire plug, the engine starter, the straw that stirs, whatever you want to say. Tanner Ross, wait out next year. He's going to be good.
Well, and he was also a bit of a grit and grind type player because, John, I think of a game that we did this year where Tanner Ross took a big hit and struggled to come off the ice. And we all said, uh-oh, if he's done, they might be done. Well, he was kind of hockey's version of Willis Reed. You blinked and he was back, and then he was playing really well.
Yeah, but I remember that game, and I remember as he skated off, he looked like he was on Rubber Lake Street from the old wrestling days. But he got to the bench, had the trainer look at him a little bit, back on the ice, let's go.
So Tanner Ross is the first forward to make our first team. The next forward, Duluth East had an interesting season. Record-wise, it wasn't that great. Strength of schedule, they may have had the best one. Hermantown's is very, very good. Duluth East is probably just a little bit better in terms of strength of schedule. And that contributed maybe to a poor record. Steve Petosha will tell you, when we're going well, we're pretty good. When we're not, we're not. And they weren't very good when Thomas Gunderson wasn't available. And when they were going, he was a huge reason why.
The guy is as good a hockey player as there is up here this year. Like, he sees the ice. He's physical. When he shoots, right? And had a timing, had an ability to time big moments with big goals. Like, he tied those two things together. He was one of the easiest ones to put on this list. It was like, okay, so it's Estabrooks and Gunderson, and all right, so let's fill the rest of the team out.
That's exactly how it went. And, John, I think of something that you say to me on a regular basis during games, that you listen to the names that I'm repeating when I'm doing the play-by-play. The East games we did, when things got steadied for Duluth East, there's another guy we're going to talk about here soon that was a big factor. But when they needed a finisher, it was Thomas Gunderson.
I agree 100%. And I kind of think I know who you're going to talk about as far as the other East player that was kind of there all the time with Thomas Gunderson. And he was a treasure to watch this year and also last year.
He'll be on the neck.
I was going to say, we'll get to him
him
soon. He just missed the cut for the first team. And because the gentleman that's going to round out the first team at a forward, I kind of chuckled at Dave Cook before the show because Dave had a brain fart, if you will, where he forgot the last name because
I only call him by his first name.
Apparently, this is hockey's version of Cher or Madonna because Dave just calls him River.
Well, and I do that in everything I do with Hermantown. It's like, oh, how's River? Yes, because it's River Freeman. And it's a player that we've seen go from, this Freeman kid, he's going to be okay when he gets older, to the last, 10 days, all of a sudden he is that guy. He's a force of nature when he's going and when he's got legs underneath him, because I think he really spent everything yesterday to get to this game. But, I mean, he's closer for them, right? On the hockey team, he's a D1 baseball guy. He's a starting running back, but he put that team on his back the other day and got them to a championship game. And he's not a senior, guys. He's coming back. So,
I was going to say, Pat Andrews called him after you did. I think he agreed with you and kind of ran with it. The next stud that Hermantown has at forward.
Yep.
And so he rounds out our first team. They get a lot of in-depth discussion. We may discuss the next two teams a little bit less just for the sake of time. But still, great players aplenty up here in our coverage of high school hockey this season. Hence why we were able to come up with three teams. Let's start team number 2 with a goaltender from a team that finished second in the state. It's Dane Calloway. That schedule is hard to beat. His team plays well defensively, so he'll talk about his vacations where you forget he's back there. But then when he was up to the task time and time again.
Yeah, there's people that are going to say, wait a minute, Callaway, how can you have Callaway when you've got all these other goaltenders? Well, that's because they play everybody, right? And Dane has moments that I think drive hockey people nuts. We talked about some of those on the air, where there's a face-off coming in your end and you're hoping your fans cheer louder and you're the one trying to orchestrate it. But he played, the teams he plays, and then the numbers that John quote, and then you see him in big games, like, how can you not?
Well, and John, this is going to be the second time that I'm going to give you a similar thought in this segment, but this was, again, a Hermantown team that didn't score, lighting up the scoreboard like previous years. So the good goaltending that Dane Calloway's given them throughout his whole Hawks career had to be spotlighted a little bit more, because you're not winning 8-1. You're winning 3-1, 2-0, what have you.
You take a look at what he did this year. I think his statistics were he ranked like 5th in the state on a lot of different things. And when you end your senior season at a 1.82 goals against and almost a 94% save percentage, you're doing a pretty good job. And hopefully he's going to have some interest in the next level.
Let's talk about a guy that's already committed to the next level. He's going to St. Thomas. He's Dane Calloway's teammate at Hermantown. Not a great day today, but before that, several great days. In fact, he was the guy that I kind of hitched my wagon to, that this is the guy I like now. Move over Ty Hansen, move over Will Esterbrooks, even though he's fantastic. This is my next young guy that, look at this guy. Henry Peterson gave you a lot to look at.
Well, and the thing about Henry Peterson, and I know not everybody knows these players, right? But there's your 6'4", this is what a defenseman's supposed to look like. But he wasn't one of those guys that was big and his skill had to catch him, right? He was very skilled and then he got bigger. And so, we talk about that with forwards in basketball, right? So he was a 6'2" point guard and then got a 7-inch growth spurt. And now he's a forward who can handle. Well, Henry Peterson is a guy who has gone from a smaller defenseman who can do everything to this, that's what they're supposed to look like kind of guy.
I think my fun fact for Henry Peterson is what Pat Andrews told us last week. He might be the first Division I commit to commit before scoring his first high school goal.
Yeah, right. I think we actually talked about that.
We did, absolutely. And John, I want to come to you with this because I know certainly on Friday and probably throughout portions of today, the anxiety, the nerves of being a Hermantown fan, Hermantown alum got to you a little bit. So players that can calm you down some are nice to have. Henry Peterson had to give you a calming factor every once in a while.
Well, absolutely. And when we do the broadcast, when we do the broadcast, we try to be as neutral as possible. But I think my 1971 alumni feelings come through every now and then. And especially yesterday when they scored when River Freeman scored that goal, it's just like, my hands were pumping in the air. But Henry Peterson does a great job of trying to calm down everything. And he and Esterbrooks are nice calming factors like the quarterbacks that we talked about.
I was going to say, we've got two teams that we're still putting together here out of 3 so far. And you've got 3 Hermantown defensemen already on it. That's pretty much proof of how good they play defensively. The other defenseman on this second team comes from a team that if they had played better defensively throughout the year would have had a better year.
Oh.
But when they got better and got to be a factor in 7AA, it was probably because of this defenseman to go with the talented forwards, Luke Anderson of Duluth East.
Yeah, the thing about Luke Anderson, and a little bit different than the rest of these guys that we've talked about, is his offensive skills are okay. The Hermantown guys are good. This kid's tougher than nails, man. He is a defenseman's defenseman, and we saw that. I think it was the game you weren't at.
Yeah, the Denfeld playoff win for East,
where Luke went in the corner playing hard minutes against the Denfeld forwards who were desperate, right, because they were trying to catch up, and he got just cross-checked like unbelievable, and you could see it hurt him. And he got up and he's kind of shaking it off, and he skated towards the center of the ice, kind of making a C towards the bench, and he got a headshot on the way in. And you could just see that he was in trouble now, right? He got up and he took his helmet off. You could see a little bit of blood trickling down. It's like, oh man, what's East going to do without? Trainer put him aside, put a couple of stitches in him. Steve made sure he sat until the trainer cleared him of all concussion stuff, and he was back on the ice, played heavy minutes the rest of the way. And that's when I looked at John and I said, that's the guy you want. That guy right there.
Certainly a gritty effort. And John, I'm going to keep us moving just for the sake of time here. But since Dave mentioned a game against Denfeld, our first forward on the second team is going to be Valtteri Luutelampi, because it felt like early on in the year especially that every time we turned around, we were doing Denfeld games. And Luutelampi was a talent that was a sight to behold. And then, of course, with the John Scott injury, he had to be. He was basically the best forward by a landslide on that Denfeld team. The hardest part about his game was the pronunciation. Everything else was a joy to watch.
I think it took me like 3 or 4 games before I finally got it right. And one of the things that he reminded me of was that kid from Chisholm that went on to play in the NHL. He's a pretty good player. And so he has great vision on the ice, and that was always fun to watch
Scott
him
Perunovich character. You had the game
whatever,
kind of likened to him.
Name is.
Yes.
Yeah, he had great vision. He was able to, be able to be the guy that passed it on to the guy that would finish for you.
Talking about short forwards who could do just about everything.
It goes to the next one pretty easily.
It certainly does.
We talked about during the first team, there's going to be another guy from Duluth East that'll come up on the second team. His name's Noah Tang.
And he might be the one we could talk the most about. Right? Because both John and I just adore the way he plays. When momentum changes for East, the middle of the momentum change is Tang. Like, he's the guy that made something happen that all of a sudden tipped the ice the other direction.
All right, so we got to keep moving. We got one more forward on the second team, and it's a guy who had one whale of a tournament. In fact, was on the state tournament all-tournament team. AJ Francisco probably deserves to be higher. He maybe got penalized for playing in the youth level Olympics because he was just out of the high school hockey season. And I think because of the hype behind him with that selection, he was a victim of expectations. He started to live up to it late in the season. For Pat Andrews, that's got to be a I can't wait till next year type moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you think you're out of the woods with Hermantown, their forwards coming back are pretty good. And he's one of them. And he sees the ice so well, and he did such a nice job in the tournament.
All right, so let's whip through the third team because we are really, really pressed for time. But these guys are worthy of honorable mentions. And another senior goaltender kicks it off.
Absolutely. Duluth Denfeld's Mr. Doyle is
Connor
in the nets.
Doyle is certainly deserving.
And he's a guy that should have probably got more love over time, but he's just surrounded by such talent. And then we're going to go to our defenseman, who we all really like from Proctor, Mr. Pavlovich, right?
Yep. Carson Pavlovich had a whale of a season, playing right now in New Mexico, of all places, but Kenan Riles of Proctor's done the same thing.
He has the perfect build for a defenseman at about 6'3" and about 210 pounds. And next to him, then, our first Duluth Marshall player is Leighton Anderson, who is almost exactly the opposite
Probably
of that.
vastly underrated also.
I think so, because when Thomas Ojard went down and he was their best player defensively, Leighton Anderson had to make a decision, really. Am I just going to wait for Thomas to come back next year, or am I going to try to be the guy? And he became the guy.
100%. Let's stay on the Marshall train because their forwards are going to be good for years to come. This is a super young team, and one of their forwards who statistically may not lead in any of the categories, goals, assists, points, whatever, but when you look at the 200-foot game, I think he's the best of the bunch.
He might be the best of the area right now with the 200-foot game because he's always in all 4 corners, you're going to find Kyler Black. He is going to be doing something. He's taking a penalty. He's making a pass. He's hitting somebody in the corner. Kyler Black is a name to remember. The next player didn't play enough to be higher on the roster.
If he would have, he might have been on the first team because his team went south without him.
Yep, and when he came back, he was still their leading scorer, and that's John Scott.
Right.
Duluth Denfeld's John Scott, he was the guy. And then when he got dinged up, it really turned their season around.
Speaking of turning things around, when Hermantown couldn't score the way they did in seasons past, they had to play lunch bucket hockey. And I think I said that 300 times at the state tournament. Yep. The ringleader of this is our last guy on the forwards for the third team, Josh Kalpanen. Stats, he probably doesn't have one. All-around game, you won it.
Yeah, you really did. And he was such a grinder. Even today when it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, even today he was that guy.
100%. So real quick with our MVP, Jon Carlson, we're doing it 3-star style. Dave Cook, go ahead.
All right, so our MVPs, and we couldn't, this isn't best, right? This is most valuable.
Most valuable to your team.
Yep, and as we always do with 3 stars, we're picking more than 3, but we're limiting ourselves to 4, John, because we're splitting a number 3.
All right, Dave, 3rd star.
Okay.
3rd star split between Thomas Gunderson and Kenan Smith, the goaltender for Duluth Marshall. We talked about Gunderson. Marshall's nowhere without their goalie this year.
Right, pressured galore.
Unbelievable.
Usually 3-1 shots against, not in Duluth Marshall's favor, but Kenan Smith standing on his head did the job.
Our number 2 MVP, and again, didn't play enough, John Scott. We just talked about him. John Scott on Denfeld made Denfeld a different team.
I was going to say the value was proven. The old song says, don't know what you got till it's gone. And then the MVP, I think we saw it yesterday because when he went out, that Matamidi win almost turned completely upside down. Will Esterbrooks, right, Jon Carlson?
Absolutely, and one of the things that I just want to quickly just put in real as an aside here, you're going to be able to see a lot of these players on Tuesday night, right, Dave?
Yes, absolutely. We've got the All-Star Hockey game. It's over at Heritage. The girls' game starts at 6 or 5.
The girls' game starts at 5:30, and for those that like the girls' hockey is such a great thing to watch. A lot of the girls from the champion World team are going to be there as well, and also from the boys' side, a lot of like Carson Pilgrim's going to be there, and also you're going to have Mina Hines from Proctor did a great job, and Marvin Cordes.
I was going to say Marvin Cordes, the big star of Warroad, will be there. Speaking of big stars, Jon Carlson, this season you were one of ours. Thank you, buddy. We'll see you soon.
All right, take care, man.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely. That's Jon Carlson. That's our first crack at Northland Fan High School Boys Hockey team selections, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Don't blink. We're going to take the world's quickest timeout and come right back. Stick around. Back here on the Northland Sports Page Prime Time Edition, it's time to play buy or sell. But first, we encourage you to buy what our sponsors are selling, Dave Cook.
Absolutely. We're going to start again with Arola Architecture Studio, Hoops Brewing, OAR Holdings, Kraus Heating and Cooling, your Carrier HVAC authorized dealer, Advantage Elbow Screen Printing, the Blackwoods Group, including their locations, Tavern on the Hill, Blackwater right downtown, locations in Two Harbors, in Proctor, and on London Road, Mount Royal Bottle Shop, Stewart's Bike Sports and Trophies, Kohler Toyota, Kohler Hyundai, and Comfort Systems.
All right, so we're going to play buy or sell as we do every week. Here's how it works. I'm going to give a statement for each of the 4 major leagues. If Dave agrees, he's going to buy and tell me why. If he disagrees, he's going to sell and tell me why. Dave's responsibility besides that is determine the order in which we play. How would you like to do it today? We're doing it turbo style.
We are going to finish with the NFL, so let's start with the Major League Baseballs.
All right, Major League Baseball. Now, this segues from something I told you today. Byron Buxton in a spring training win had a heck of a day. I believe multiple extra base hits, including a home run. Buy or sell, because you've been enthusiastic and encouraged by, they say he's playing center, and we're supposed to believe it to this point. Buy or sell that this is the year that Byron Buxton finally puts it all together.
Oh, if he plays center field with his buddy Correa and a team that has a chance to win a lot if he's good, yeah, I think if he can play this year, he's at the right age. He's seen how it works. He's seen success on a team basis. Yeah, if he's healthy, this is his year.
All right, so I agree with you, but you said if. I challenge you to take the if away. Is he going to do it or not? Just make a prediction.
I can't say yes because he hasn't proven in 3 years that he can play center field for any length of time, and he does not help them as a designated hitter.
I was going to say, I'm going to begrudgingly say sell that he doesn't figure it out, and I understand why the Twins are doing this because the fans would riot if they didn't, but the fact that we keep needing to acquire insurance policies tells me that they're not entirely sold on him either or not buying what he's supposedly able to do. The Margot deal tells me what aren't they telling us?
And Austin Martin doesn't have a sniff. So, I mean, if they felt Buxton was in and Martin just needed a little seasoning, they could season a 27-year-old on the bench. Because he's not in their conversation, they don't have a backup plan either.
All right, 1 league down, 3 to go. Continue.
Let's go to the National Basketball Association.
All right, so the NBA, Rudy Gobert made an interesting assertion.
Yes, he did.
About whether or not betting is ruining games in the NBA or not.
Influencing officials.
Right, influencing, I'm going to say ruining, because if you watched Wolves-Cavs, supposedly that's what it did. But I'm not going to go that direction with Rudy.
Oh, good.
I'm going to go this direction. Last year, when Cat was out, Rudy was not good. In fact, that's where the Herschel Walker assertions came from, fair or not. Cat's out again for an extended period of time. Buy or sell that you believe that Rudy can fall back on last year's experience and be better this time around without Towns.
I think he will be better without Towns this year, and I don't think it has anything to do with Towns. I think it has everything to do with Mike Conley, because Conley knows how to play with Rudy. And now he's getting a feel for Ant, and he's getting a feel for Slow-Mo and Reed and all the rest of them, McDaniels. And so I think that Rudy's got a shot just to stay the course, and let's see if Naz Reid can pick up the slack. And to tell you what, if Naz Reid can pick up the slack, you know who's not going to be a Timberwolves next year?
Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yep.
I'm going to buy that Rudy's going to be fine without Towns as well, and for a lot of the reasons that you said, because I think some of it, we say this about high school athletes, to some extent college, not as much about pro, but I think you have to. I think for Rudy, a lot of it is between the ears.
Yep.
I think last year it was, oh my gosh, this isn't a system I'm familiar with. The system I was supposed to be in with Towns isn't here because he's not here. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And a lot of times he guessed wrong. There's no guessing to Rudy Gobert's game right now.
Nope.
He's not adjusting to those around him because he doesn't care. He's just, this is what I'm good at. This is what I bring, and I'm bringing it. And it's been very good for the Timberwolves to this point. And I'll tell you what, Rudy Gobert may look better because it's just Anthony Edwards' team. Now, it didn't work out last night on the back end of a back-to-back, what have you, but it's just Ant's team, and Rudy's going to be there to pick up the mess.
Well, let's hope that all of a sudden they're going to be the 6th seed because, the referees think you think we're betting. Well, let's make sure everything is called fair and square on you, buddy.
Well, that's the other buy or sell I almost went with. Do you wish the Timberwolves were in the East? I don't think they match up well over there, but their .688 win percentage that has them in a dogfight for 1 through 4 would be a lock at 2 in the East.
What I'm saying is that the officials are going to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gobert, that was
you guys
foul."
Thought you weren't getting calls
Yes,
before?
exactly.
Check us out now. All right, so we've got a couple
National
left.
Hockey Association.
All right, it's not an association. I'm not sure what the NHA would be, but the NHL, the National Hockey
Been
League.
a long day.
All right, so buy or sell was basically what the Wild played. They sold plenty. Yeah. So I'm going to keep it simple because we're pressed for time. But buy or sell that you're now officially in who cares mode for the Wild.
You're asking me that.
Yes,
That's
I am.
The thing. I've been in that, probably built the boat that everybody who's getting on the bandwagon is in. Because the Wild have been out of it for so long. I don't want them to be the 8th seed and just get blown out by the 1 seed. I don't care to see that. So I don't care.
All right, so I'm going the Dave Cook route because I'm going to care, but I'm going to care in a way that you would. We're going to see a lot of kids play.
We are.
I want to see, with the salary cap constraints finally coming off this team soon, what kids are worth keeping and what kids aren't worth keeping.
Good call.
And you're going to get 20 games to see that.
Yep, that's a good call, Brian.
So I channeled my inner Dave Cook and said, young kids, I want to see what they have.
All right, I want to hear this National Football League thing you were talking about.
All right, we're going to have time to touch on this later on, too, because we got a whole segment of just you and me at the end of the show, but I'm just going to put it out there.
Yeah.
Kirk rumors galore.
Yep.
Atlanta is going to have him in no time.
Yep.
Some people say this is all a game. He's coming back to Minnesota. Buy or sell that Kirk Cousins' days as a Minnesota Viking are over.
They're over. And the thing is nobody should be mad at either the Vikings or Kirk Cousins. If somebody rolls in and the number I saw today, and I read that to you, 3 years, $180 million guaranteed.
I thought it was 120.
$120 million.
180 would be ridiculous.
120, $40 million a year. It might have been. Anyways, doesn't matter. 3 years guaranteed at that amount. One, the Vikings cannot pay that. They don't have a deep enough roster to pay that. Two, Kirk Cousins would be crazy not to go. If the Vikings say, you love it here, we'll give you 1 year, 45, guaranteed that whole first year, and if these two things break right, we'll guarantee season 2. Honestly, if they do anything more than that, it's almost wrong for the franchise. Not just for Kirk, but it would hurt the franchise long term because they don't have any money.
I think his days are over as well, and I think they're over because even the folks, including myself, who have defended him and liked him when he's been maliciously attacked for seemingly no reason, even we're kind of mentally moved on by now. The Vikings have said all the right things, but they haven't committed firmly to Kirk's going to be a Minnesota Viking. Just forget all the rest of the outside noise. There's been a lot of, I hope it works out. We're going to explore this option and this option. Kirk knows he's wanted here, but he has to do what's best for him. You're trying to read between the lines with a lot of things that are being said, and it just doesn't seem that, we're steadfast and we're firm on being the franchise that Kirk Cousins is going to be with.
Yep.
And again, I don't think Kirk Cousins will ever be as bad as the naysayers tried to paint him into that corner. He'll never be as good as the apologists tried to put him on. But unless you're enjoying mediocrity, move on.
He will be considered the second best quarterback in Vikings history.
Right. Just ahead of Dante. Behind Sir Francis.
Yep. Just ahead of Dante.
Absolutely correct. All right. Buy or sell that CJ Osuchukwu is here in a couple minutes.
Excellent. Let's talk to CJ, and I'm excited to talk to him about his girls and where they went and how they grew.
Absolutely. We'll talk about girls basketball throughout northeastern Minnesota because that state tournament is next. Hour number 2 is next as well. We're here till 9. Stick around. We'll be right back.